the worst thing you could do to yourself is hold on to who they once were instead of seeing them for who they are now. I'm a person where I've been in the same exact situation that you're in. You've been in a relationship with a person, or you've been dealing with a person, and it seems like they did this complete 180. It seems like they became this completely different person, to where the visions y'all had in the past, the conversations y'all had, how they said they felt about you and stuff like that, it's not adding up to what their actions are showing now. Maybe they've decided to leave your life. Maybe they all of a sudden said they wanted to break up and go a different direction, and it all leaves you just completely confused. And I have a lot of people who DM me, who I'm working with clients and stuff, and they're like, I just can't believe that this is who they are now. It feels like they're a completely different person. It feels like they've changed. And what I've had to realize, as someone who relates to that, when people say one thing and out of nowhere do a completely different action that completely contradicts what they told me in the past, you have to understand that people will tell you who they desire to be, or who they want to be, but when it actually comes time to be that person, they're a completely different person. I've had to realize, like, in friendships and relationships in general, like, people will tell you what sounds good. People will tell you the version of themselves that they want to be, but then when it comes time to actually being in the moment, and it comes to being wrapped up in emotions and feelings and discomfort, fears, all those things pop up, they fall into who they actually are as a person. And so a lot of people are going to make a lot of false promises. A lot of people are going to, completely 180 with their feelings. People get bored, or they say they're not having fun anymore, or things get uncomfortable and they don't want to work things out. Maybe they get sensations elsewhere, and, they build another connection that they think is best for them. Like, whatever the case might be, or they feel like you're not the person for them. Like, whatever the case might be, you have to understand that, people can change at any point in time, and that you can't cling on to your expectations sometimes. I know that's a hard thing, because I myself, we expect things as people. People tell us one thing, and if you built up trust with a person, then you trust their word, and you accept that as their word, and that might become your expectation. But I feel like in just going through a lot in my own life, like, I can't cling on to people's words. I can't cling on to who people claim to be. I gotta more so just pay attention to people's actions. I gotta pay attention to how people are showing up, because it's easy to say one thing when things are always going well, and then it's another thing to actually show up as that person when things go south. To put in the effort when times get hard, or to fight through discomfort, or to have the tough conversations, or to face the fears you might have, and have conversations, and have to grow and change who you are as a person. Like, I've come to realize that not everybody's about that. And in their head, they might want to be that person. They might be like, oh, I'm not this selfish person. I'm not a person who, is opposed to change. I'm not a person who can't work things out. I like communication. But when it actually gets in the heat of the moment, some people don't know how to show up as that person. I've had to realize that. And, again, that's showing themselves, or that's showing you who they actually are. And I get it. Again, you might have this vision in your mind. You maybe, saw yourselves getting married, or you never thought about life without them. And then all of a sudden, one day, within a week or so, things just completely then again go 180. And so that reality comes crushing down on you, to where you had this expectation, you thought life was heading in this direction, and now you have to completely turn in a completely different direction without somebody who has maybe been in it consistently for a year or two, or maybe been consistently in it for even just a couple months. And so it makes you have to change direction all of a sudden, also unwillingly. A lot of times we got to make change in these relationships without ever thinking we would ever need to make those changes, or not even wanting to make those changes at all. You have your own intentions, and you want to fight through things. Maybe you want to be able to work things out. Maybe you want to be able to correct yourself, grow yourself. You want them to fix their issues, and you're hoping that they grow. And I find that we create a hope for ourselves to hold on to the place that we found comfort in. And I think that's a good thing to practice in relationships. But I think you also have to recognize when it's just a one-way street, because a lot of people, again, they'll tell you one thing, they'll tell you their intentions of wanting to rebuild, wanting to fix things, wanting to be with you, they love you, whatever they might be in the moment. They'll tell you a lot of different things, but then they'll show up again as a completely different person, and that's what you have to pay attention to. And real quick, if you're in a season of your life where you find yourself holding on to who a person once was, and living in the past and how things once were, and you're struggling to find acceptance with who people are and where your relationship stands with that person now currently, be sure to check out my one-on-one coaching down below in the description and see if it's something that's for you and apply today. But anyways, back to the video. And that could be a hard thing to accept, because again, we have this idea of who people are in our mind, because that's often who we want them to be, because that essentially validates why we're in a relationship with them. And so the moment that they flip the script, it's like, how can you be this person? This isn't who I know you as. You're supposed to be this, and this. And we don't want to accept the fact of who they are, because we know if we saw them for who they were and we actually thought about it, we would know, okay, this isn't a situation I should be in. This isn't somebody I should be dealing with. And sometimes that's a hard decision to make. And again, I understand it because I've been there, but I also understand the reality of, you got to make those tough decisions in order to be able to show up for yourself, because if you don't show up for you, then nobody's gonna show up for you. And again, when you hold on to who people were or who you want them to be, and you think you could fix them, you think you can grow them, you think you just need to wait and things will work out themselves over time, you keep yourself invested in relationships dealing with people who in the end just drain you, in the end just hurt you, and in the end just prolong your pain. Imagine staying in a relationship for, let's just say, a year, opposed to 2 years, because you were in denial and constantly trying to fix a person and constantly trying to be enough for them, essentially, and hope that they finally value you, or hope that they finally didn't want to let you go. That's a year of pain compared to 2 years of pain. Or just think about the letting go process. That's letting go of a 1 year relationship compared to a 2 year relationship. And some of y'all have been dealing with the same person for multiple years, to where you're doing nothing but extending the pain that is probably eventually to come, and just damaging yourself more and more and more, and making it harder for you to heal in the end. Because I found that with myself, when I actually took the time to know what I wanted for myself, the type of person I wanted for myself, and I took the space to actually back up, because a lot of us were it's like you're so close up, you're constantly putting effort in, you're constantly putting energy into it, that you're not seeing the bigger picture, because you're emotionally just like, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want to fix this person, I want things to work out. So you're not seeing the situation for the reality of it. But when I took this time to actually back up, when I took the time to start seeing the situation for what it was, and took some space to myself, I actually started to question, do I really think this is a person I want in my life? Do I really think this is the person that's for me? And when I actually took that time to ask myself, who is this person really? Who have they said they are compared to who they shown up as? And then what do I want for myself, and do they align with that? And I would list out, the cons, or, why the person wasn't for me. It would be things like lack of communication, or, not backing up their words and stuff like that. And so, in listing those things out, I would be able to say, I really don't want this person. I just might want the feeling and the comfort that comes with them occasionally. And so, when I learned to kind of start being that person for myself, and I kind of started, again, making decisions that align with my values, then I could, say no. Then I didn't feel the need to reach out, because I knew, this might be a temptation or an urge to just get a void within myself feel, but I know the person themselves, that's not somebody I want in my life. That's not somebody who's for me, because they lack these specific things that don't align with the type of people that I want around me. And when you can make decisions that align, again, with your values, your morals, the type of people you want around you, your respect for yourself, your love for yourself, then, it becomes a lot more clearer, and over time a lot easier to say no to people. It's not think that you need a person in order to be happy or to be at peace, or to not think that, to see a person for who they are and find acceptance for who they are rather than who they told you they were, or who you wanted them to be, or who you expected them to be, or who they once were once upon a time. Because a lot of times people are originally in the beginning like a person for us, and then over time, you know, people change, feelings change, and you know, things get uncomfortable, things get tough, things get boring, and so people want to go different directions. And sometimes we're just clinging on to who they once were, and we're trying to almost force them to get back to them old selves, but that's just no longer the person that they are. And a lot of times it's not going to make sense because people aren't going to explain their reasons behind their actions. And I've had to, you know, come to terms with not trying to figure out that why. A lot of us, we sit in our pain, and we sit in the past, dwell in the past, because we're constantly trying to figure out answers to questions that we can't ourselves provide the answers to. And that's what leads us to reaching out and having last conversations, thinking we need closure. Like, no, we don't need closure. Closure is already in who the person's showing up as. That's just not the ending to the story that you wanted. That's just not who you wanted them to be. And in your head, you're like, well, who they've shown up as has to be a reason why they were that person. And, you know, seeing their actions, that's not a good enough reason. I got to know more. I got to know what happened. I got to know what went through their head. And all of that is just a type of hope, essentially, to think that, you know, if I can get these reasons, if I can understand why, then I can stop asking these questions about myself, or then I'll be able to fix it. Then I'll be able to explain myself. Then we'll be able to work on it. But again, that's just a sense of hope. That's holding on to hope. You don't need closure. You think you need closure because, again, that's your way of holding on to hope that if you get closure, then you can fix things, or maybe getting closure will finally give you answers to questions you've been asking about yourself, you know, whether you're good enough, or whether you need to change who you are, or whether you're worth loving, and whatever questions you might have been asking yourself. But again, when you learn to detach yourself from the outcome as well, and understand people's change very rarely has anything to do with you, and has a lot to do with themselves when it comes to, you know, facing uncomfortable conversations, when it faces the uncomfortable parts of relationships in general, when it comes to them communicating and stuff like that, or, you know, again, even their trauma, stuff like that. Like, whatever the reasons might be, I've had to learn that, you know, it's not your responsibility to figure out those whys, and you don't need to understand those whys in order for you to be at peace or be happy again. And eventually, over time, again, you find acceptance, and you find, you know, peace with the fact of not understanding why things turned out the way they did, and, you know, not costing yourself your own peace, or not going out of your way to try and figure out those whys or get answers to those questions because of what it costs you in order to get them. You know, sometimes it's not worth reinvesting yourself emotionally to try and re-spark a sense of hope, or think you could fix things, or think you could change a person by reaching out in order to try and get some type of closure. Sometimes it's just not worth it. And, you know, you also just have to understand that in the process of letting go, you're not just always letting go of a person, but sometimes you're letting go of the expectation you created in your head, the version of yourself you thought you were going to be allowed to be, you know, the relationship you thought you were stepping into, and stuff like that. And so it's a lot to let go of, but again, it all comes with time. It all comes with distances. It's all a process. But the longer you keep emotionally holding on to the hope that those things will eventually come true, then the harder it will be for you to let go, and the longer your process of letting go will be. But, you know, I love and appreciate you guys as always. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. Be sure to like and leave a comment down below on some takeaways you have from the video, as well as check out my one-on-one coaching down below in the description. And I'm gonna catch you guys in the next video. Peace.